Hello Internet, Nerdlocker.com, here on the last day of San Diego Comic-Con, and I'm finishing up my Comic-Con with Mr. Scott Snyder. How's your week been going?
It's been great, man. It's a good Sunday, too. I feel like, I'm ready to go.
People, yeah, I think everyone's ready to get out of here.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm ready to go. Let's do it. I'm ready to go.
Okay, well, I'm ready to start talking about Batman.
Cool, man.
All right, so you're doing 0 Year. And honestly, after Court of Owls, after Death of the Family, I was kind of thinking like, oh, we're going to take a kind of a break in Batman, but this seems to be just as explosive as everything else.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel bad because, about it, because I get a lot of anxiety and stress with these big stories, and I really get worried about it. But my feeling at the end of the day, honestly, is if you're not going to go in there and do stories like that, and I don't mean bombastic stories, I mean stories that are personally important to you and really shake the character up for you yourself, I'd rather step aside and let somebody else write them, because there's hundreds of people out there that are great writers and would love to tell their Batman story, so I'm not going to be on there and spin my wheels. So with 0 Year, DC came to us and said, we need an origin for Batman because he doesn't have one in the 52, and I was like, you have Year One, that is the origin. But it became clear that it doesn't fit anymore, not just in terms of the way the city looks and stuff, but the characters in Year One have different origins in the 52, so it's been dismantled as that outside of Batman, which is fine. But so I was like, all right, if somebody's going to do it, we're going to do it, and I had this idea for a story that was completely different, 180 degrees, where Year One is sort of grim and intimate and wonderfully so, and very about him and Jim Gordon, one that was post-apocalyptic Gotham, bombastic, 3 sections, bright, dark, wild city, just, all just completely ours, and about the modern city deeply, about what makes you afraid now. Because for me, growing up in New York in the 80s, the fears that you saw in Year One were mine. I couldn't go on the subway as a kid. I couldn't go to Central Park. I couldn't go to Times Square unless I did go to Times Square anyway, but I wasn't supposed to go to Times Square. And all of that stuff. And so we want to do one that's about now. You see Bruce look different. The costume's going to be very different than anything you saw. His look outside of the costume is going to be different very soon, too. So we really want it to be like, wow, this is an origin happening right now, today. Even though it's 6 years ago, I don't want it to look like 6 years ago. I want it to happen now. It's like, this is Batman growing in today's city with things that are personal to me about today's sort of metropolitan fears.
Now, you have the Red Hood gang facing off with them. I assume that's going to be the reoccurring gang throughout this whole thing. Are we going to see them after Year 0 Year?
You might. I don't want to give it away. You might see big elements of them of afterwards, and certainly one of them has, repercussion, things that echo down through history. So the really big climax, the finale with the Red Hood gang, happens in issue 24, and sort of the story moves into this next section where Gotham has been sort of brutalized in a way that changes it. And then the third section that happens from the 8th to 11th issue really changes Gotham even further into the wild, overgrown, post-apocalyptic city you saw at the opening of 21. So you're going to get 3 sections that are very different from each other, that show Batman in 3 very different ways, and visually very different city in each one. So while the Red Hood gang's huge in the first part, you might see some surprising villains in the second and third part.
Now, Court of Owls, we attacked Gotham. We made it so that, or you made it so that, Bruce didn't know his own city. Death of the Family, his family has been torn apart. What other grounds do you plan on attacking Batman on?
Well, in this, in 0 Year, we really sort of attack the idea that he doesn't, in the first section, it really is about meaning nothing. That's what Alfred is saying, is you don't mean anything. You know what I mean? You fight as a ghost, you leave Bruce Wayne as a corpse, legally dead in the ground, and you're fighting a gang, and that gang is supposed to represent fears about, modern urban terrorism and things like that too, and the random violence that happens, a lot of the time with shootings and things like that, where they just come out of nowhere on a sunny afternoon and things like that. And what he's saying is to fight something that means nothing, and the way they embrace meaning nothing. And you'll see in issue 3, actually, and it's a spoiler, but the Red Hood leader says, you know what inspired all of it? Your parents' death. Because I was a foster kid at the time, and my foster parents came home and put a lock on the door for the first time because they realized anything can happen to anybody. It's not just, gang violence, and if you walk to this neighborhood, something bad could happen. It can hit you anywhere, at any moment, and make no sense. And that's wonderful. And he's like, and that's what formed this wonderful gang. And I wear the red hood because I invite the wolf the way Little Red Riding Hood does. I say, come, violence, let's do this, And so in a lot of ways, that night bore them both, and that's part of what it's really about.
That's absolutely terrifying.
Thanks.
I'm gonna have to jump off of Batman because I could sit here all day and talk about it. I want to bring up American Vampire.
Sure.
We had that awesome little one-shot come out. I know there's kind of like a
anthology. Yeah.
Yes. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, I can tell you, I've just finished reading. I guess out of the 8 stories, I finished mine. Just the other day, and Raphael's drawing it. But I've read 6 about in finished form, and the other 2 are almost done. Becky Cloonan's I read. Jason Aaron has one, actually. He wasn't announced, but he does. It's amazing. It's about Roanoke Colony. Becky Cloonan did one about the movie Greed being filmed in the desert where people mysteriously keep dying. Greg Rucka did an amazing one about being shanghaied in Portland. And they're just terrific. I'm really proud of them, genuinely. And it's an honor to have these writers I just adore come and write in the world of American Vampire. So if you love the series, you're going to get a lot of things that are actually pretty relevant to it. You're going to get teases of what's to come in my part. Perfect. And in the other ones, you get secret moments in history about Hattie. Gail Simone's story about Hattie is amazing. Fabio and Gabriel also, Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon, like their story about jazz in the 40s is terrific. Some of them really have heavy reveals about American Vampire mythology, past and future, and some of them are just wonderful tales in the world of American Vampire. And I'm positive if you like the series, you'll love it. If you've never read the series, you can come read it and sample American Vampire, and it won't be intimidating.
Perfect. You guys make sure you're looking out for that. Next up, I'm going to talk about The Wake.
Sure.
Another horror comic from you.
Yeah.
What was different about writing The Wake compared to like Sever and the other horror comics you've done?
Well, The Wake was one for me, honestly, where I wanted to go and just try something really different. So it is, the first part really is a horror comic and where I'm comfortable, but it has these other elements that you see popping up where it jumps 1 million years or 2 million years and 200 years and these cuts that hint at a story that's much bigger than anything I've done. So part of the structure of it is that the first part is sort of horror and the second part is actually speculative post-apocalyptic science fiction that ties back into what you saw in the story in a big way, both with characters and with themes and ideas, and everything is kind of solved at the end. So I've never done a story like that where the scope of it is that big, where there's science fiction and not horror and adventure, in that way. And I told Sean, I'm like, let's make this a place we can go to experiment and have fun and not worry about sales, not worry about, the pressures that come with superhero comics sometimes and the sales of those. Let's just do it for fun. And we're really grateful that everyone's been so supportive. We didn't expect it to do as well as it's doing, and really appreciate it, because it's just our place to go and tell a story that's scary for both of us because we're trying things we've never tried before and really excited about.
Awesome. And lastly, I'm going to bring up Superman Unchained.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, horror comics and Batman, you love the dark, the gritty. How was it weird writing going from Batman to Superman, like the Boy Scout?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because you feel like you're commuting from Gotham, which is always like rainy and gloomy, and you go through the tunnel and then it's like sunny and the buildings are always big. But at the end of the day, I guess my best answer for that is I love horror deeply, always, since I was a little kid, mostly because I think in really good horror, what you're really facing is your fears about yourself somehow. And the monsters represent the things you're afraid are true somehow. So, the zombies in Night of the Living Dead essentially become, mirrors for the people's worst. And that's my favorite movie of all time. And, in good Stephen King, which is always good, but in his best stuff, it's, a monster exacerbates the horrifying things that people will do to each other, in The Stand or in Cujo and all these things. And it represents kind of the monster within. And so for me, you can do that without actually having a monster. And so Superman is a horror book in that regard. And the antagonist in that series breaks him to his core and says, listen, he's like, or General Lane says, this is the real Superman, dude. He has changed the world for 70 years behind your back. The world used to look like this with all these red dots all over the map. These are the dangerous places in the world to, democracy. Look at it now. And it's like, and he's like, what have you done except kill people, basically, by not saving them? He's like, you're a bigger villain than you are a hero, because secretly you don't go and change the geopolitical spectrum. You don't take down that warlord in East Africa. You don't take down, this regime, because you need to hear, people clapping for you all the time. And that's why you're just a big coward. And then the dude himself, Wraith, the character who's kind of the ghost in history, he has a similar physiology to Superman's. He's not from Krypton, but he has powers that Superman doesn't have, and he's kind of like, don't worry, you'll learn how to do this in a few years, and he's like,
Awesome.
So I'm really excited about it, man.
Are we going to see any other characters or villains pop up in that book?
Yeah, well, Lex plays a huge part. He has like a really big secret, kind of role that I think will surprise people. And the supporting cast is all really big. Lois is probably the biggest character after Superman and Wraith is Lois, and then I'd say Lex. And Jimmy actually has the next biggest role. He has a big moment in issue 3 and 4 coming up. You're going to see Lana a little bit too, but in terms of other villains, you might get a cameo. I mean, you might get a cameo from Parasite or one of those when you see the Maw, the prison that they're in. But other than that, I want to keep it that classic cast, and do something new with it, like Lois, Clark, Perry, Jimmy, Lex, and just do it that way.
How do you approach the different dynamic between the Bat family and the Superman family? Like you just said, Lois and everyone playing a role in the book.
It's entirely different. It's so different because Superman is so open with everything except his identity, meaning he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and Clark is almost a microcosm of the things he's worrying about as Superman in this huge scale and in a small scale on the human level. So he'll be writing about these horrible things that then he has to fight, and I've never been interested really in him worrying about sort of smaller pedestrian stuff. I always feel like Clark is wrestling with the issues he wrestles with as Superman as Clark constantly. And when he talks to Lois, they talk about those same issues, the threats to the world. And so there's a transparency to those characters, and all different as he takes his glasses off. And the Batman, to me, is extremely guarded, and part of what Death of the Family is about. And I actually edited the lettering for trade to make this much darker and clearer, because it's what it was about from Go, but I wanted to just really nail it. Is Joker saying, why don't you just kill them now? Because the point is, one day they'll all be dead, and you'll have let that happen, and you'll have kept us alive, your villains. And at the very end, it's going to be you and me, and you know it. So just get it over with. It's a mercy killing. Do it now. Because do it by your hand. Give them that. Give it some dignity. Because at the end of the day, they'll all be in the fucking ground, and we'll be here celebrating with you, and you'll still be fighting us. So, and he's like, because we're your family, and Batman says, not tonight. This is the death of that family, us. But in the end, you see Joker wins pretty hard. So it's really dark that way, So his relationship to his family, he loves them dearly, but it's complicated, and he makes mistakes, and he's guarded, and it really does have a foreboding, ominous feel about what might happen, All
right. Well, you guys need to make sure you're reading Batman, American Vampire, The Wake, and Superman Unchained. This is Scott Snyder. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder, and you're watching Nerdlocker, a place for your inner nerd.